For anybody listening at home, we just need a couple more members to come in, and then we'll start.
She's in track.
We'll call the committee to order. Do I have a motion to go in executive session? Seconded by the chair. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. We are in executive session. First two things that I want to do is bills from second, or bills that we have as a second committee. 46. I'll take a motion on 46. Oh.
Oh, right, we didn't do it. Right, okay, Sandra, you're on 46?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, the motion for 46 came from Senator Bradley, I believe, and seconded by Senator Ennis.
Yes, sir.
On House Bill 46, discussion.
What was the motion, sir?
The motion was to adopt, how to pass. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. And Senator Ennis will take that one up.
We'll do that.
And the next bill is House Bill 504 for the Adult Pro Board. Senator Rosenwald moves ought to pass, and I'll second it. Discussion? Seeing no discussion? Oh, Senator D'Alessandro.
There is an appropriation attached to this bill. Is that correct?
We'll go into 504 and we'll look.
Unless there have been some changes, there's,
51.
there are two levels. There's one level for the vice chair at 40,000 per year. And the chairperson and the vice chair both get 40,000 a year. And what did the individuals get?
Oh, I see.
300 a day?
Can't be both of them getting 40,000 because fiscal note only says 51.5 total for the year. So, and
Okay, so they're already getting 20, and this is an additional 20 for the vice chair and the chair and the board
okay, so
members.
that's the reason why it could be
Right.
40,000
Right,
total. Yep.
okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any additional comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it. And
Who will pick it up?
Senator Rosenwald. Okay, that leaves us with 4 bills on the list, and we're doing education tomorrow. So we're good to go. We'll grab the packets now, if you would. We're on page 1, Department of Business and Economic Affairs, and line item number 1. Senator Bradley brought this in. It's 1.5 million, 23 money.
So, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I mean, we've had a lot of discussion about a pulp and paper stabilization grant program. We heard from representatives of the mill in Gorham the other day. There's another mill, Monadnock paper in somewhere. Yeah, thank you. So, in the spirit of trying to keep a manageable budget with a manageable spend, and I think some of the conversations I've had offline with people, it is an important issue. There are jobs. It is an important manufacturing. I'm a little bit more familiar with the Monadnock paper mill than I am the one in Gorham. I think, given the number of jobs, that this $1.5 million grant is appropriate. It's obviously not as much as Senator Gendro proposed. I have talked to her about it, and I think she would be okay with it.
Okay. Further discussion? Senator.
Thank you. I asked LBA for a history of when we might, in previous years, have given taxpayer money directly to for-profit businesses, and they were unable to come up with any. We have, when we started the Balsams redevelopment project, the state guaranteed some bonds. With Army, we created business profits tax exemptions, and we loaned Pennachuck Water Company $5 million. But in terms of actually giving taxpayer money to a business that is for profit, while I'm sensitive to the number of jobs they have, I'm not comfortable with doing that. I would be very happy to loan them the money, but I can't vote to just give them taxpayer money. I think that sets a precedent, and it's one that I think it's a place government ought not to go. Thank you.
Further discussion? Senator
Thank you,
D'Alessandro.
Chairman. Well, I'm fairly familiar with the Cascade Mill. I've spent time there and so forth. I know the paper business, and I know a lot of investment was made in that mill, but I don't think the money that they're asking for handles their situation. And why didn't we appropriate our funds for both of these entities? They're businesses who needed it, and there was money available to take care of them. Now, I think they did get PPP money, and they did get an additional $30,000, or somebody did for another item here. So we have pumped fairly significant amounts of money into this situation. And I think if we're going to talk about giving them more money, that there ought to be a fairly explicit plan as to how this money is going to be used, what it's going to achieve. I mean, it may not be enough money to save them, then we're just throwing money at it. So I have a, so there are other things that I think could merit funding that we haven't funded. And I think we should be careful about this. I know a little bit about Monadnock paper. My father-in-law worked there. My father-in-law was a salesman for Monadnock paper. My father-in-law worked for Gilbert Verdi, and this Mr. Verdi's father, and managed a plant in Manchester during the Second World War. So I'm fairly familiar with both of these entities. But I guess I would concur with my colleague in that, why don't we loan them the money? we could do it at a very reasonable rate. We have done things like this in the past. We took along with Senator Bradley and myself and a number of others, we took a giant leap forward when we said we would not charge Army business profits tax or business enterprise tax for 10 years in order for them to get that business going. And it's proved, from my vantage point, it's proved to be a successful move. And they're hiring people, they're bringing people on, they're doing renovations in Manchester to buildings, and that was I think a very successful move on our part. I just don't think this will do the trick. It won't make a bad thing good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You wanna go?
Senator Ennis.
Just briefly, I mean, I'm as free market as they come. And normally, I would say maybe not to something like this. At the same time, I think we have to look at the context, particularly up in Gorham. You know, what's happening there with the local and regional economy? How important is this particular industry? And I think the answer is very important. Not only do a lot of people work there and draw an income, but they buy things from the area, from the community, from the state, from other businesses, which leads to additional employment. It's that economic multiplier effect. And I don't think we can underemphasize the importance of that to the regional economy in northern New Hampshire. I do appreciate the comment from the two senators. I think they're right. And we do have to be careful, exceptionally careful with this sort of thing. I think every business owner would love to get cash from the government. But we have to be thoughtful about where we put it and why we put it. And I just feel this is a unique situation that needs a slightly different approach. So I will be supporting this amendment. Thank you.
Senator Pearl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator, I kind of view this, if you recall back about 3 or 4 years back, we had a serious issue in the agricultural world with drought. And the state was able to put some money in drought relief to help out the farms. And I sort of view this situation as the same, as every now and again, there's a time where we recognize that there's a real extenuating circumstance that we have to help out in the community a little bit. So I will be supporting this just because I appreciate the support we've had in the past in my industry. Thank you.
Senator D'Alessandro.
First of all, I agree with you. We did the right thing, and I visited the farms, and I saw the animals, and I saw what was going on. And I knew that the appropriation would have a positive effect saving these people because they were able to purchase the feed that they weren't able to grow because of the drought. I think that was a situation. We wanted to keep an industry alive, an industry that, by virtue of economics, is disappearing. All right, so we kept alive what we had, and I think that was a very worthy investment. I supported it. I don't think this is in the same category. I just don't see this in the same category because I don't think it's, first of all, I don't think it's enough. That's number one. And number two, all of these people have had money from us, from the federal government. The PPP program was in place, a lot of money, and nobody had to pay it back. Nobody had to pay it back. When you get into this stuff, this is risk capital, and they do it. They do it. That machine, and I'm empathetic to the people at the Cascade, but they knew the risk that they were taking there. And the risk-reward ratio they must have thought it was worth doing, but in the end, it wasn't. And the woman who originally did it pulled out. She went belly up and left us. But I just don't. I don't think this is. I can find better ways to spend that money, to be honest with you, where it would help people directly. You know, I have empathy for the working man. I came from that environment, but indeed, I just don't think this is enough in that context, and I can find better ways to spend this money. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Rosenwald and Senator Bradley.
I was just going to say, I'm confident that by requiring Fish and Game to do the online snowmobile registrations, we're doing a lot for the economy in Gorham. And like my colleague on the left, it's not enough. When is it going to stop? Why are we not offering a zero interest loan instead?
Senator Bradley.
Thank you. So the first argument was, we should not be giving any money because we haven't given any money to private entities, to for-profit businesses. I think Senator Pearl did a really good job of refuting that we actually have. And we did it without knowing if it was enough money to keep family farms alive or not in a drought situation. As I recall, it was $2 or $3 million because I was on that committee that worked on that issue during the drought. I think we did hear testimony about the specific problems that the Mill and Gorham is having with their boiler. They and it's a relatively discrete item that, should we provide them this help, they'll be able to fix that and then hopefully be sustainable. I think they've worked long and hard to make it the case. I think that creating a specific loan program with this small amount of money is going to be a lot more rigmarole than it's worth. And I think this is a very discrete appropriation that can only benefit one or two businesses in the state. And I think we're better off doing this with the hopes that it does preserve, you know, those couple of businesses that have been cited here, as opposed to creating a loan, which would probably require even more money. And I just think because it's a small amount of money and because it's meant to help now, this is the way to go.
Senator Ennis.
You know, and in some ways, we do subsidize private businesses, sometimes indirectly. We all love riding the bus to Boston, and yet the state is an active participant in that with the terminals, in some cases, I believe, owning buses and leasing those back. So, you know, again, you have to look at the greater good, and I think this investment is one, as Senator Bradley described, has a focus to it and will really help. So, thank you.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. We do subsidize the buses going to Boston, but you know why we do it? Because it's mitigation, and we had to do it. If we wanted 93, we had to do that. That's a Hobson's choice, buddy. You either do it or you don't get 93. You don't get a chance to spend $800 million fixing a road, which we did. Yeah. And you know how we did that. Different situation entirely. Everybody in the state of New Hampshire was affected by 93, and anyone who drives from the Massachusetts line to the beautiful city of Manchester, New Hampshire, has been given an opportunity to ride on a beautiful road that we paid for. And the government said, if you want this beautiful road that you can pay for, you better mitigate thousands of acres, and you better cut down the smog and what's coming out of those vehicles in order to make this happen. So that was, we didn't have much of a choice in that particular situation. And as a matter of fact, to be honest with you, by delaying the mitigation, time after time after time, it cost us more money. A $49 million project became a $700 million project. I call that growth on the negative side. Thank you.
The chair would also like to note that if the businesses in the North Country fail, that the increase in welfare, the increase in a lot of expenses will be borne by every citizen in the state of New Hampshire alongside the people who are driving up 93. So right now we have a motion by Senator Bradley, a second by Senator Innes to accept line item 1 and take no action on line item 2. Is there further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. And the ayes have it. The next one is mine, and that is a proposal for $90,000 to the secretary. That's in 1667 on page 6.
I'll move the item.
Senator Bradley moves,
Second?
seconded by Senator Ennis. Yes, ma'am.
My understanding is that the bill has passed the House and been ordered to third reading, and it also has an appropriation of the same amount. Are we going to be doubly appropriating the money then? Because both have 90,000, but it's, I think the bill has it over the biennium, and this amendment is in current year surplus, so are we going to be spending 180,000?
If,
So the bill has a cost of $90,000, but it doesn't have an appropriation attached to it. So this was a request from the Department of State asking for an appropriation so they could implement the additional audits that would be required of them.
Okay, so the bill did not have the
It does not have an
appropriation.
appropriation.
all right. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Before we leave the Department of State, we appropriated money for the portal of 600 and whatever. And at this time, I would move to remove that money from the bill.
Second.
Discussion?
Which bill?
So I would just say, and I thank you for that, Mr. Chair, I think that Senate Bill 70 should rise or fall on its own merit, and that's the reason for this motion.
Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay.
No,
And Department of State, now we're in Department of Justice. Do we have the new words? Their deadline was today. Seeing a bunch of blank faces. Senator D'Alessandro, do you have any insight for us? Because you were the one that was,
The only thing I can tell you is, we have the two pieces of legislation sitting on our desk, the two amendments. And I don't know, Senator Bradley, have there been changes in the document that you were gonna offer? And, Senator Roosevelt and I, we're depending on the results of your conversation with the Attorney General and, with, Attorney Broderick to find out if changes needed to be made.
Thank you, Senator D. My understanding is an agreement has been reached between the Attorney General and Justice Broderick's assistant. And I think it was an agreement between Jennifer Ramsey and, I apologize for forgetting Justice Broderick's assistant's name. I am not certain where that language is. We've got a lot of moving pieces, so I would ask, I think, that we put it on hold.
Okay. Fine.
And I have, an hour ago, texted the Attorney General and asked for it.
Okay, thank you. Senator Roosevelt, is that, your,
yeah,
that's fine.
sounds like a good plan.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you.
Department of Environmental Services, number 1. There's, according to this, we've got an amendment coming from OLS at some point.
Yes, on this one, we did receive language, forwarded it to legislative services. There, it needs a little bit of deciphering. I put the attorney in contact with the person at Environmental Services so they can work through the language. We probably won't have it today.
So this issue deals with the Wetlands Council, the Solid Waste Council, and a couple of other councils, and there's some consternation, I guess, that those councils becoming advisory. So the chair of the Wetlands Council is somebody that's in my district. I asked him to work with Commissioner Scott. They're doing that. My understanding is that folks from the Solid Waste Council are doing the same thing. I believe there's agreed upon language, but it hasn't been drafted, so I think that's a bit of the background.
Okay. So that one is on hold. Moving on to item number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we've all probably received a lot of input from various folks around the state about the cyanobacteria fund. As I recall, this was Senator Gaida's legislation to create the fund. It was not funded in the last budget. My recollection, and correct me if I'm wrong, by the LBA, that the House version of HB 2 had $1 per year in the fund. As somebody that lives in the Lakes region and has seen cyanobacteria blooms, I think it is something that is pretty important for any of us that have any bodies of water in our district, because it's a growing problem. So I would hope that we can support what should help different lake organizations get started with some of the removal through this grant fund.
Second,
Senator Bradley
if
moved.
that was a motion.
Senator Rosenwald second. It is now.
Thank you.
It is now. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it.
Okay, good.
Division of Long-Term Supports and Services.
So thank you again, Mr. Chair. Senator Rosenwald and I have collaborated with folks, in particular Alex from representing the DD community. We proposed an amendment yesterday that would have allowed one person who has found a facility in New Hampshire to be able to be transferred to that facility if the bed moratorium is lifted for 1 year. The language, and I think Senator Rosenwald picked up on this, did not have that limitation of 1 year. This amendment should resolve that, because as you can see on line 15, it expires on June 30th.
Second.
Motion made by Senator Bradley, seconded by Senator Rosenwald. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. This one here, I gotta go. Division of Medical Services. Both line item number 1, and then we get down to behavioral health, 1 and 2. I think that they're still in such a flux that it is not appropriate to take them up at this point. I'll open them up for discussion, though. Seeing no discussion, then we're on to miscellaneous items number 1. Senator Gray, land exchange. What you've got in the packet is what I described to you before about the swapping of the land in Rochester for the new district court. So Senator Gray moves the item.
Senator Bradley seconds.
Senator Bradley seconds. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. And number 2, Senator Bradley has Amendment 1987 relative to the Business Tax General Fund Education Trust Fund split.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if, the LBA may need to explain it if there are questions, but let me just give a brief overview. The, current formula, is difficult for the Department of Revenue Administration to implement. And they have asked for more clarity, so it can be implemented in the appropriate splits. This amendment helps the DRA, I'm told, to implement the split. But what it does do is return the allocation between the Education Trust Fund and the general fund to essentially the same level of funding. I think that's important, that we have adequate dollars in the, no pun intended, Education Trust Fund to fund education. The House formula dropping that allocation significantly pits different education programs against the general fund. I'd prefer to keep Education Trust Fund dollars in education, and this amendment does that, while at the same time fixing DRA's concern.
Further discussion, Senator Rosenbaum.
Questions, if I could. So I think that about 35% of the business tax revenues currently go toward the Education Trust Fund. The House budget dropped it to 22.5% and took lots of stuff out. Does that mean tomorrow we're going to see an amendment on what is funded in the Education Trust Fund? Because this is a big increase, I think, isn't it, about 35% currently?
So my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the allocation is roughly the same as where we are now. It may shift by a couple of $1 million in the percentages, but my understanding is the governor's plan that he submitted to the House was the 35% that you referenced. The House took it down to 22%, and then that's where education programs were in competition with general fund programs. I don't believe, and Mickey can correct me if I'm wrong, that there will need to be an amendment to restore funding to those education programs, because we're essentially going back to current law.
Yeah, the way you explained it's correct. So this amendment here would return the general and education business tax splits to essentially current law, but it does do that technical cleanup that Senator Bradley referred to. And you are correct that with this revenue now going to the Education Trust Fund, this committee will decide to bring those programs that were under current law Education Trust Fund programs from the general fund, as the House proposed, back to the Education Trust Fund. So that would be part of the DOE discussion that we've got planned for tomorrow.
So we'll probably see a further amendment on what is funded out of the Education Trust Fund tomorrow.
Well, the intent is to keep the current programs that are being funded by the Education Trust Fund continue to be funded by the Education Trust Fund. So I guess we may need to see an amendment because the House changed that. So
Right.
my apologies for misspeaking before.
So,
But that's the intent.
okay, so
Okay.
that was the Weiler amendment. That
My
to
intent is to
keep it,
make sure that we are as close to possible as current law, funding current programs in the Education Trust Fund while doing the DRA fix.
okay, so we'll see something tomorrow.
Yes.
Thank you.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I was around when we created this bill in 1999?
Yeah, I
Okay.
was too.
No, so you and I were there, and in those days, the fabrication called the Educational Trust was created, because there is no trust. We do not have an educational trust. What we do is allocate money towards education, and we do it through the lottery, right, specifically. And then, because of the graciousness of business, what we did is we took an allocation of the business profits tax and the business enterprise tax and designated those for education. But if those monies were ever short, we immediately went to the general fund and made the difference. If those items produced more money at the end of the biennium, we roll that money back into the general fund, right? Isn't that the process? So the trust is a figment of our imagination. Because if it were a trust, it would go in perpetuity. And the monies would never be transferred one way or the other. But the general fund, in reality, is responsible. We are responsible for funding education. And we are responsible for funding adequate education, special ed, and all of the other things that are together. I think that brings clarity to the situation. And if Senator Bradley wants to bring it back to where it was, to me, that makes sense. That's fine, as long as we all understand the fact that if there's a shortage, it comes from the general fund. If there's an overage, it goes back to the general fund because it's really a general fund appropriation. Unless I'm wrong, Mickey.
You're mostly right.
I love
If there is a deficit in the education trust fund, the general fund will kick in to bring the education trust fund to zero. Any surplus in the education trust fund does stay in the education trust fund unless there's any sort of legislation to transfer funds out.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Rosenbaum.
Thank you. I know we're going to talk about education funding tomorrow, but has LBA looked at the plan that we're going to be discussing tomorrow and this amendment and determined there will not be a deficit going forward, like beyond the next biennium even? Or-
I can't speak beyond the 24-25 biennium at this time.
How do 24 and 25 look?
Comfortable, I guess.
Okay.
But I think we'll.
That's very
on-
Mel
once
Brooks
some
of
decisions
you.
are made, once the decisions are made in committee as far as level of funding for some of these programs, then we can build a surplus statement per the usual protocol and provide that to the committee so you can see where we're at.
Seeing no other discussion, then Senator Bradley moves. And Senator Innes seconds. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. And number 3, we're going to take that amendment back, so there's no action needed. That will be handled in the committee in the Senate. Page 3, page 3, top of the page. We have Amendment 2009. That is to give us money back.
Yep. I can speak to this one.
Well,
in the-
Nathan's here too, so.
Yes, and this,
Yeah, we'll let you speak, but if Nathan wants to come up and sit, he can.
sure. So this was not actually a department request. However, I believe the department is on board with it, and Nathan can confirm that. But in the process of going through the committee's actions to date, we realized that you had approved 2 appropriations for the same thing, and that was an audit of the New Heights eligibility system. So the committee had approved an appropriation in fiscal '23, which was in House Bill 2, and in fiscal '24, which was in House Bill 1. So the action here would be to zero out the House Bill 1 appropriation and reduce the House Bill 2 appropriation to $167,700, which is the general fund share that the department needs to complete this audit. And the result of those actions would be the savings that you see here.
And I see a head shaking, so.
Yes, Nathan White, Chief Financial Officer with HHS. What Kevin said is correct. We had come forward and asked for a reduction in the general funds and an increase in the federal funds, and the difference is what you see here in HB2.
Okay. Senator Rosenwald moves, Senator D'Alessandro seconds. Further discussion, seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, the ayes have it. And the last one on the page, but we do have some more things to talk about afterward. Senator Ennis.
Yes, sir. If I
Amendment
might.
2016.
Yes, this amendment was drafted today. It did not come out the way that I anticipated it would. I'd like to bring it back tomorrow, please.
Further discussion.
The objective is to get some additional support to the system for Keenan Plymouth. Thank you.
That item is on hold. All right, I got a phone call from the Chief Justice of Superior Court saying that we made some errors. I think you were working on it with Chief Justice Neto?
Yes, I talked to the Director of Administration in putting together the budget for the drug courts. They inadvertently left one county out. Which county? I don't remember exactly which county. But it's $375,000 a year for a total of $750 for the biennium. Diane Martin offered to be here in a flash. If you need her, I can call her by phone, but that's the gist of it.
I believe that we have voted in support of all of the drug court things that they brought in. So if Senator Rosenwald moves it and seconded by Senator Ennis for a committee amendment to make the adjustment to fund our neglected county. We don't need to change the amounts, the caps on the thing, that'll take care of itself, I believe.
The caps are good, and I'll make that adjustment in House Bill 1 in the budget.
All right, further discussion, seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. All right. We're down to the last few, okay? We do have a meeting scheduled for, after Friday? We have Tuesday and Wednesday if we need it. All right, she asked me about scheduling Thursday, and I said no, because I know you guys will all be done by then. I have told the Republican caucus that nothing comes in from the Republican side after tomorrow that doesn't get voted on by the whole Republican caucus. I hope the Democrats will do the same. I want to make sure that we, limit these last minute things that are coming in. Because there are going to be things, and I know that it's going to be floor amendments to do that, but we need to finish our work so that all of the other people can finish their work. So we're going to try to get everything we can tomorrow. There's a few things that will hang out until Tuesday, but that's as best we can do. Questions, comments, things that you've got out there that you want on the radar now? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to come out of executive session.
So moved.
Moved and seconded, come out of executive session. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Our business today being complete, we are adjourned.
Well, that was fast.
We're meeting upstairs.
Yes.